Let's try to do a basic drawing file, which is called an orthographic. It gives you a front, a top, and a side view that helps dimension things to be prototyped so that you know exactly what it is you're trying to make. Let's start with something super basic that I already have open, like a basic rectangle that would represent one of the sides of our box. This one's the long side. I think it goes 3.5 inches top to bottom, and it goes 5 inches or 6 inches across the top. Dimensions don't matter. We'll bring those back in a moment. So from your home screen, we're going to activate a drawing file. We're going to work with a basic drawing file that doesn't have any title blocks, so all of this information could be handy for an engineering to submit. An engineer would put all of their personal information as they submit plans toward the client, so that the client would have information to be able to pass on to the construction people or manufacturing people. We don't really need that for our purposes. And the other thing is by default, it comes out to be a fairly large sheet. I want to use a smaller sheet. So if I go to that sheet button and just right click on it and edit it, I want the basic sheets that we set up to be A sheets. Our title block on this one ends up becoming enormous. So I want to just get rid of it altogether. So this is the thing that's giving us that title block. So let's just delete it, but leave your default. The border itself is still perfectly fine. So now pressing base allows me to draw in files that I want to be able to dimension properly. So a box, I wanted to dimension something like the side of a box. So I'm going to bring in my box side, and I said I was going to bring in the large side. So again, these orthographics have, it's like thinking of your page as being in 4 quadrants, where there's a line down the center and a line across the center going horizontally. I want to place each of these views in approximately in the center of its quadrant. So what I did was place the first front view, and then all I did was moved my mouse and left clicked where I wanted the other views. So now I'm going to press OK because everything's looking great. In general, the views are wire bound. They're kind of like a wire frame, which is totally fine for dimensioning. The one I don't want to dimension is my isometric, the actual three-dimensional object, to help me remember what the object looks like. That one I just went to the outside edge, double clicked, and now I had an opportunity to change some of its properties, and I just clicked on shading to give it a bit more of a realistic shading look. So in order to finish this drawing file, all I would need is to add a few dimensions so that I would actually know what it is I'm trying to make. So the thickness of the wood would need to be known, so that would be something I'd want to communicate. And then either on the top or this one, I would want to know what the width of the piece of wood is, so 6 inches, that's good. And what's the height of my object, 3.5. Those are the only unique parts that I need to identify, because if I put a 3 over here, I would just be, or a 3.5 over here, I would be repeating that dimension, so it's going to be the same thing with a 6 over there. So that would be the end of it for a drawing file. Let's try that one more time for those people who are with me and want to give it another practice run. If I'm doing one project and I want to have multiple parts dimensioned, I'm just going to add new sheets. So I'm not going to necessarily start over. I can just say, hey, let's make another clean sheet, and then it'll just be sheet 1, sheet 2, and I could give these things meaningful names if I wanted to by renaming it. So I'm going to bring in my lid because it's a bit more complex where it actually had 2 assembled parts to it. So if I bring in my box lid assembly, it's actually the one I want to bring in as an assembly of the 2 parts. So box, not that one, I made a mistake. So I want to bring in my box lid assembly. So box lid assembly. I must have saved it in my parts file. Made a mistake on saving it in the wrong place. So let's just see, because this one will actually have a more interesting orthographic arrangement. And let's see. So that's perfect perspective. I would want the smaller insert to be on the front, otherwise it would be hidden. So I'm happy with that. And then I want to go to the outside edge again, just double click on that so that you'll have the opportunity to add some shading to make that look better. So let's think about how we want to dimension this thing. So what would I need to know? I would need to, so flipping to annotate and dimension, I would need to know the overall thickness of my lid. And then I would need to know at least one of these other two. So as soon as I know that information, since that 0.5 is getting blocked, I'm going to actually revert and dimension the other one just so that I can get a clean text on that without it being blocked by another line. So I have that thickness taken care of. And now I have a choice. I can either dimension, so if I'm looking at the front, I'm looking at the edge around the insert, which is my inside circle. And then I have the outside blue circle. I think personally, dimensioning off of this picture is going to be cleaner because I'm not going to have any overlapping or intersecting lines. Otherwise, my dimensions would pass into the figure if I did it over here. Let me show you. So if I did it here, now I have lines that extend inside the object. And that's okay. But I like the way that it does not intersect inside the object if I simply dimension. So I have a dimension there. I could dimension that one. This is where you have some artistic and aesthetic options on how you want to lay out your dimensions in order to communicate the information of your project. So again, I could dimension this and I'd have some overlap, but if I do it over here, I don't have to worry about that overlap. And then I think I'll finish it over here. So I don't need these on both because if it's 5 inches up and down from my front view, it doesn't change when I move to my side view. So that 5 and that 4 are all the information I need, and there's nothing else that I'd really need in order for me to construct that part and reproduce it. So there you go, drawing files, also called orthographics. Setting them up on Inventor is actually a pretty reasonable and meaningful process in the prototyping sequence.